Hey everybody, welcome back. So it's a quick video today, but it's a pretty important topic. Had a big uptick here recently in folks coming up with questions about they've got a new snake, it's not eating for them, it's not acting the way they think it should, it might seem like it's defensive and things like that. So there's a couple things that we need to talk about, the diversity of the behavior that you're going to see from different animals because they do have different personalities. And some of the things that we can do to just make it easier on them and smooth the whole process over. So you won't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back on Intrepid Exotics. Whether you're a lifelong keeper or just getting started, help us encourage responsible keeping, conservation, and public education in the interest of keeping our reptiles safe and healthy as we protect them for future generations. You're invited to spend time with us as we experience these awesome animals together on Intrepid Exotics. So you're going to hear a whole myriad of advice from folks. One thing that you're going to hear really commonly when you get a new snake is get the enclosure set up, get the temperature, get the humidity set up right, make sure they've got their hides, and leave them alone for a good week or so. Let them get acclimated to the environment. Now sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes more is necessary. Sometimes you don't even need to do that. Really depends on the animals, especially when we're talking about animals like retics, the more intelligent of the snakes that we're going to be working with. They're going to have different personalities. I've had some that I've gotten and just immediately they were happy to see me, they were relaxed, they were used to being handled, and they were just fine. I've had others, like you guys may know from the Sri Lankan series that we put out, where it took me 5 months before I could get him to take a meal on his own. So there's a big range of different behaviors that you can see. And in order to keep this kind of as short as possible, we're just going to kind of gloss over the basics real quick. Now, one thing that you're going to hear is, bigger is better when it comes to enclosures. It's not always the case, and it's definitely not the case when you're bringing in a new snake. Now, when I brought the Sri Lankan in here, I set this enclosure up for him. It's big. It's got a lot of perching and hide spots and stuff like that in it, and he stayed in there forever and just could never get comfortable. Like I said, it took almost 5 months just to get him to take a meal on his own. I fed him a couple times in that time frame there, but moving him over to the smaller enclosure, maybe it's that, maybe it's the fact that he just decided he wanted to eat, maybe it's the fact that the handling kind of got him calmed down a little bit, but whatever the case may be, coincidentally it didn't happen until I got him into a little bit smaller enclosure where he didn't feel quite so exposed. So that's one thing to take into consideration, is if you've got a snake that's acting weird or it's not eating on you, when you first put it into a new enclosure, a lot of times they're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to take them a good few days sometimes, a couple weeks sometimes, maybe a few weeks. That all depends on the animal for them to get comfortable enough in there. Because you got to kind of realize that snakes, when they're in the wild, their natural instinct is to not eat if they feel threatened. They're not going to go after a meal if they're scared, because their only defense is their mouth. And they're not going to occupy that with a food item. And you'll see a lot of times, if they are in the process of eating and something comes up to attack them, they may regurge that meal in order to facilitate getting out of there really quick. So a stressed out, anxious snake is not going to really readily take a meal. And like I said, there's caveats to all this stuff. There's always exceptions to the rules. But a big thing to keep in mind is when you get your new animal, they may be shipped, you may be picking them up from a person or a pet store or something like that. The rule of thumb is to just set the enclosure up for them, make sure they got plenty of water, make sure they got plenty of places to hide, and just let them sit in there and relax. And I know it's hard to do because you get a new snake, you want to mess with it, you want to play with it, you want to handle it, you want to see how quickly you can get them to do tricks for you. But it's just one of those things. We've got to have the self-control to just set them in there, leave them alone, let them relax. And typically, after you give them a few days, you can go ahead and try and offer them a meal, see if they eat. If they start eating right off the bat like that after you've given them a few days, a lot of times you're fine. It means they're secure. There still may be issues handling and things like that. But at least getting them to eat is a big thing. The other snakes that I've taken in outside of Bob the Sri Lankan here. You know, within the first couple days, I'd offered them a meal. They took it. We're good. I didn't hold off on handling because they didn't seem stressed. They seemed to get used to their enclosures and stuff really quick. But that's not always the case. You know, I've had one person here recently ask me about his emerald tree boa. And he's got the enclosure all set up, did everything right, everything looked great, and puts a snake in there, and for that first day, it's just laying on the ground, it's not perching, it's acting kind of weird. Well, that kind of, like I said, goes with the territory sometimes, where you've got to give them time to get comfortable. That particular animal's probably sitting down here trying to keep as low a profile as he can, until he feels comfortable enough to kind of expose himself and get up there on those perches and stuff like that. So, you know, we're always open. If you've got specific questions and things like that, you know, you can always throw them up on Facebook. I do my best to get to all of that stuff as I can. You know, same thing with the comments. I read every comment that comes into this channel for the past 2 years. I may not have time to respond to them all, but I do read them. And you can see that because I try and throw that heart down on every one of them just to let everybody, you know, acknowledge everybody's participation. And, you know, like I said, if you're a new keeper and you're working with these animals kind of for the first time or whatever, you know, always make sure you've got your mentors and things like that that can help you with specific stuff. But try not to stress too much within that first week of having that animal. Now, something to keep in mind through this whole process too is, of course, the quarantine process. If you've got other animals and you're bringing new animals in, you want to try and quarantine them because you need time to observe them to make sure they don't have mites, look for any kind of respiratory infections, look for any kind of disease process that may be going on. So it can be kind of tough sometimes to completely let them get situated in their environment. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll just put down plain paper towels, something like that, in the enclosure instead of substrate if they were planning on using any of that, just so they can kind of keep it sterile, check for mites easier and things like that. Before you start going in, you start loading the substrate and you get all that stuff set up, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, now the substrate's filled with mite eggs and I got to throw it all away anyway, go sterile, clean everything up. So that can make things a little bit trickier, complicated a little bit, because now they're, you know, the time that you've had them quarantined, they've gotten comfortable, they've gotten used to that environment. Now all of a sudden you're going in, you're pulling all the paper towels out, you're putting your substrate in, and you know that can throw them for a loop a little bit. So you just got to be patient with them. You know, as things change, let them get used to their environment. You can overhandle your animals. Too much handling on a snake can stress them out. You know, got to remember that they're naturally kind of solitary animals. It's not like a puppy dog that just jumps up and down, you know, every time they see you. They do appreciate being left alone from time to time. So, you know, moderate handling, you know, a little bit every day, you know, preferably probably every other day, stuff like that. And just make sure that you're ending all of your handling sessions on a positive note, or the most positive note that you possibly can. And you'll find that given a little bit of patience and a little bit of understanding about how these guys work, I think you'll find that your new snakes settle in pretty comfortably in a reasonable amount of time, and you can pretty much stop stressing about it at that point. So hope this helped you guys. Again, get this thing out to you know, any of the new keepers that you think may have issues or problems. I'm sure there's things I missed. Like I said, this is just kind of a brief video here tonight because I just wanted to get this video out before the weekend. We've got a lot of other stuff that we need to touch on. Plus, we got our live stream coming up tomorrow night at 8 Eastern. Tomorrow night being Saturday, as of time of filming right now. And we've got a third USARK alert coming out. There's always so much stuff going on and not enough time to get to it. So we'll get this out. You guys check this. I'm going to put this video up on some handling techniques that may help you guys. And we'll see you next time on Intrepid Exotics.